Hello and welcome back to Warpath, the podcast dedicated to the history of the Buffalo Sabres. In episode 1, we went through the founding and the steps taken by the Knox brothers to bring NHL hockey to Buffalo. And on this episode, we will explore the crest and colors of the Buffalo Sabres. Specifically, this episode will explore the original uniforms worn by the Sabres, the original jerseys that they took the ice in first in 1970, 1971. And this episode will feature quotes and interviews from Paul Lukas of Uniwatch and Eric Bodamer, formerly of Adidas and now currently with Fanatics in their hockey uniform division.
My brother Norrie and I are by no means known as gamblers. However, in 1970, we gambled that Buffalo would be a great place for National Hockey League franchise.
Corner Robert going after it, he scores! Corner Robert! A backhand in front! Hatchick with a miraculous save! Here come the Buffalo Sabres!
The hard work was over. December 2nd, 1969, the NHL officially informed Seymour and Northrop Knox that their expansion application had been accepted and that Buffalo would be joining the NHL for the 1970-71 season. The Niagara Frontier Hockey Corporation was successful in their bid. They were successful in all of the work that they had been doing dating back to 1965. They had their financing, they had a home arena, they had a team. The sports landscape in Buffalo in the late 1960s consisted of the Buffalo Bills, of course, the AHL Buffalo Bisons, and minor league baseball's Buffalo Bisons as well. All three teams featured nicknames that were a play on the city's moniker, and that was something that the management of the hockey club, the Niagara Frontier Hockey Corporation, wanted to avoid. They wanted their nickname, they wanted their team name to be unique, not only to Western New York, but to the NHL as well. This is actually something that's quoted on the club's 40th anniversary celebration materials, and that quote reads as follows. It was preferred that the moniker of the hockey team be unlike that of any professional squad in any major North American sport. The desire to have a unique nickname was going to require a lot of creativity on behalf of Niagara Frontier Hockey Corporation. If the hockey team was going to have a unique name that was not derivative of the city of Buffalo's moniker, they were going to have to work for it. Therefore, the team opened a naming contest to the public. A pretty good idea to draw on the entire population or most of the population of Western New York to come up with a creative, unique nickname as opposed to trying to do it internally. Over 13,000 entries would be made for the contest, and of that lot, there were over 1,000 names submitted which did not relate or stem from the word Buffalo and were also not in use by another professional sports team. Some of the rejected names, or some of the names that were part of that 1,000, included names such as the Flying Zeppelins, the Streaks, Buzzing Bees, and the Comets. Sabres would ultimately be selected as the winner, and as quoted by PR director Chuck Barr in the release regarding the name, a Sabre is renowned as a clean, sharp, decisive, and penetrating weapon on offense, as well as a strong, parrying weapon on defense. That ability to simultaneously attack and defend was a quality that ownership hoped their new team would embody. This is also something that I think we've heard many times throughout the club's history when it comes to the team name. The idea that ownership was enchanted by the idea of naming their team after this weapon, after a sword, the saber, that was equally effective on offense as it was on defense, given the need for hockey players and hockey teams to exhibit those qualities. Now, surely the use of the Canadian spelling is something that has vexed many young fans throughout the region. It's also perplexed things like autocorrect. And even to this day, it's not uncommon to see people spell Sabres ERS, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But believe it or not, that decision was actually made for a specific reason. This is something that's referenced in Fabric of the Game, a book that chronicles uniform history of the entire NHL. And in Fabric of the Game, they note that Northrop Knox had explained that the team hoped that by using RE instead of ER would be a way to give fans in Southern Ontario a greater identification and connection to the club. Now, Sabres was the name that was selected. It was the name that stood out to ownership and stood out to the management group, but it was not a single entry into the contest. In fact, there were 4 separate entries of Sabres that were in the naming contest. So the team actually had to hold a second drawing to determine who of those 4 fans would win the honor of being the naming contest grand prize winner. The grand prize for the naming contest winner would be a pair of season tickets for the 1970-71 season, something I'm sure plenty of people were very, very excited about when entering the naming contest. Looking at this through the lens of history, it's kind of funny to look back at in hindsight because of the drastic amount of value all of the Sabres ownership groups will have gotten out of this name. The name and ultimately the branding of a professional sports team certainly vastly outweighs the value of a single season's worth of tickets. And of course, that isn't to insinuate the Knoxes or the Sabres as a whole were up to anything nefarious. I think in that era, certainly, and for an expansion franchise of any sport, it makes for a great way to connect with your fans. And so, by no means do I think the Sabres were wrong for doing this. I'm just pointing out simply that through the lens of history, it is sort of funny to look back and weigh the value of a single set of season tickets in 1970, 1971 versus over 50 years of branding, merchandise sales, licensing, you name it. It is simply a funny quirk of history, but to compare how things were done in the late 1960s, early 1970s to the massive apparatus that goes into virtually any decision made by a pro sports franchise today is night and day. So it is kind of funny to look back on the 1960s, 1970s of, hey, we're going to have a naming contest for our new team. If you win a set of season tickets. That's a tremendous prize for anyone to win, especially in that era. But now looking forward to today, and again, you weigh the difference in value between those season tickets and what a pro sports franchise's branding is worth, and it is kind of astonishing to compare again over the course of 50 plus years. So to recap, there were multiple entries for Sabres, the name that was, of course, selected by the organization. And because there were multiple entries, the team was going to hold a second contest, a second drawing to determine who would win. And then again, they would be the person who was credited, if you will, for naming the Buffalo Sabres. And again, referencing the Sabres 40th anniversary website, they credit a man named Robert Sonalatier of Williamsville as the person selected from the drawing, and therefore the person credited with naming the Sabres. There are other sources that indicate other names, other individuals who are the people who came up with the name Sabres, but not only is Mr. Sonalatier enshrined on the Sabres' own website as the person who won the naming contest, but he was also referenced in a Buffalo News article from October 5th, 1989. This was an article for the Sabres' 20th anniversary. He was referenced in this article also as the person being credited with winning the contest. Funny enough, that article notes that while Robert Sonalatier's name was the one that was drawn as the winning entry of Sabres, it was actually his younger brother Mark who was the person who actually submitted the name. Mark used his brother Robert in order to put in multiple entries into the naming contest. That Buffalo News article gives some additional details into the mindset and the thought process that Mark had when entering his brother's name in the contest. The Buffalo News article reads as follows. Then a senior at Williamsville South High School, Mark got around the rule allowing only one entry per person by submitting entries in the names of several family members. I sent Sabres in under my brother Bob's name, said Mark Sonalatier, now a Buffalo attorney. My own name was Blades. Most Buffalo sports teams were always alliterative. I thought about skates being sharp, cutting edges, and so forth, and came up with Sabres and Blades. I won a pair of season tickets for the first year. The weird thing is, I went away to college at Ohio Wesleyan, and I think I only got to a couple of games. My brother, who was 2 years older, was at Clarkson College and couldn't go either. So again, if you see another person credited with coming up with Sabres, know that it was a pair of brothers from Williamsville who were the ones that were ultimately behind the team's name, even though they didn't really get to use the grand prize that they were awarded. While picking the name required a little bit more creativity and perhaps a little bit more time, selecting the colors seems to have come quite easily for the Knoxes. They selected blue and gold as an homage to the colors of the Aurora Polo Club, where the family has a long history of participation in polo, and specifically the Knox brothers and their father competed in the sport. The Knoxes' history in polo is as colorful as the Sabres' original uniforms. Seymour II was an avid player who toured the world playing the sport. He was a skilled and accomplished talent and reached the finals of the U.S. Open 3 different times in his life. He finished as a runner up twice and captured the U.S. Open title in 1933 with the Aurora Polo Club. Seymour III and Norty followed his legacy as skilled players in their own right. The brothers reached the U.S. Open finals on 2 separate occasions, finishing as a runner up each time. The Knox family's exploits on the polo grounds took them around the world, particularly Norty, who earned several accolades for his play. Norty would captain the U.S. polo team in the Cup of the Americas in 1965 and 1969, and he was later enshrined in the Museum of Polo Hall of Fame in 1994. Therefore, it was only logical to bring the family's love for their home polo club into their passion for hockey in Buffalo. Thus, the Sabres would sport uniforms made of a bold, royal blue, and gold, or the Aurora colors, as the family often referred to them. There has also been a rumor that has passed around from time to time that the team had wished to further distinguish themselves from their neighbors to the north, and as a way to improve upon the blue and white uniforms worn by the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Knoxes selected gold as it was a color awarded to competition winners through things like gold medals or trophies. Whether or not that rumor is specifically true or not can't really be verified, but it's a fun bit of lore to consider when you think about the decisions to pick blue and gold and to honor the Aurora Polo Club with the hockey team's uniform colors. The backstory and the thinking behind selecting blue and gold was one of the many things I spoke to Eric Bodamer about. Eric is a Buffalo native. He has spent time with companies such as Nike, Adidas, and Fanatics. During his time with Adidas, Eric led the effort to redesign the Sabres uniforms in 2020. In addition to the design of the current Goathead alternate uniform, Eric also worked on Buffalo's uniforms for the 2018 Winter Classic and the Heritage Classic played in Hamilton, Ontario. So, in addition to his fandom, these opportunities to work directly with the Sabres organization have afforded him even deeper insight to the Sabres uniform history.
It's funny because I was actually out to lunch and walking around Knox Farm State Park with Seymour the Fourth when he told me about the polo. Told me about the polo anecdote, and I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's why we picked blue and gold." And yet, I'm like, "Whoa, mind blown!" Right, walking around the grounds with the guy himself, and so yeah, there was that, and there was I'm trying to remember if he had mentioned something about like a horse name or something like that, but he had a lot of really good stories.
Not only did the decision to select blue and gold provide an avenue for the Knoxes to honor their home polo club, it also gave the Sabres a very unique look within the larger world of Major League sports. It's something that Paul Lukas of UniWatch offered a really insightful take on.
The Sabres really had a great foundational look, a great foundational color scheme. And they were lucky enough, the original, you think of the original 6 in the NHL. Amazingly, nobody had royal blue and yellow, or gold, if you want to call it gold. Nobody had that as their original color scheme from the original 6. And so that was available. It's a can't miss color scheme. It looks great.
At the time of their inception, the Sabres were officially the second team to wear blue and gold on their uniforms. The Blues, of course, had entered the league in 1967 and also used a blue and gold color scheme. But upon entry, the Sabres and the Blues were the only 2 teams with that sort of uniform design and uniform color, and the Sabres were the lone team in the league's East Division to wear blue and gold on their uniforms. The team's original logo encircles a charging white bison positioned above a pair of crossed, gold-hilted sabers on a blue background with a gold outline. Few logos do a better job of fully illustrating a team's name better than the Sabres' iconic crest.
You know what it means? It means comfort. It means home. There's a simplicity about it and a comfort about it that it's like putting on an old sweater, a nice warm old sweater, and it just feels good. It's just, I don't know, that's the best way to describe it. I've looked at it a million, for years and a million times, and it never gets old. Yeah, it's comforting. It's beautiful in its simplicity. It was back in the day before marketing speak and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, well, we are you got 2 crossed swords, right? I mean, that's what a fight is. So the 2 swords fighting, or and you got the bison and he's charging, and it's just comforting and beautiful in its simplicity and its message. For me, when I started working on that project, it was really about growing up as a kid in Buffalo. And the Knox family was sort of this, I'm just a kid from North Tonawanda. I'm a latchkey kid from North Tonawanda, right? And to me, the Knox family was like this royalty. They were like, you know, the Daddy Warbucks and the Rockefellers of Buffalo. And there was this heraldry about it. There was like to me, it was like the Sabres crest reminded me of like a heraldic crest, like a family crest, the cross swords and the bison. Instead of a bear or a lion, it was a bison.
I'm thankful that Eric made that connection of the animal that might have been at the center of a noble crest, in this case being a bison, because one of the most notable aspects of the Sabres logo, of course, is the white bison. The white bison is considered sacred by Native American tribes, with many stories tied to the importance of the white buffalo, particularly calves. One Lakota story tells of a time the tribe was desperate for food and two scouts encountered a beautiful woman who was dressed in white. She appeared to the two men and told them to return to their tribe, as she would come to them soon. When she presented herself to the Lakota people, she gave them a sacred pipe, which showed how all things were connected. After teaching them to pray 7 sacred ways, she laid down and rolled on the ground 4 times. Each time she changed colors before rising as a white buffalo, before disappearing. The white buffalo is thus considered to be the most sacred living thing on earth. According to the National Park Service, a white bison calf is a sign to begin life's sacred loop. White bison are also excessively rare. Only 1 in 10 million bison will be born white, giving the charging bison that adorns the Sabres uniforms a legacy unlike that of nearly any other logo in professional sports.
Buffalo is a weird city because, for both the Sabres and the Bills, the city name is represented graphically, right? Like you have an actual buffalo or a bison or whatever you want to call it. There's really no other city that does anything like that. And it's sort of unusual in that sense. The team is called the Sabres, but the main visual thrust of the logo is a buffalo, right? It's a bison, and it does have sabers, but it's really Buffalo as a city is unique that way. With your two primary pro teams, the Sabres and the Bills, where the Bills' name is even like it's like what is a bill? It's about Buffalo Bill, but it really is about the buffalo. And I think that is the most interesting thing about the Sabres' identity is that visually it's more about the city than about the team name, or it's more about the city name than the team name. And it works. I mean that in a good way. Not many other cities can do that. Again, I live in New York. What would you use you could put an apple, like the Big Apple, right? But that's like about our nickname. It's not, it evokes the city, but it's not like about the literal name of the city. And there's no way to have the literal name of New York except to spell it out and say New York. And Buffalo is kind of unique that way. And I think that was a really cool choice that they made. And I think it works. I think it absolutely works because a bison is also a strong animal mascot. It has a sense of power, a sense of dignity. But it told, that initial, I think of it as like the Gilbert Perrault era for the Sabres, with the buffalo and, he's like in mid leap or whatever, or mid charge, and the two sabers, like to me, like they nailed it right there. Like I love that look of the Sabres, and I don't think it's a surprise or an accident that even when they've moved away from it, they've always come back to it.
I love Paul's take on the logos there. I think it's really cool to think about how unique Buffalo is with the logos for our pro sports teams. It's not as if it's something that I would have ever overlooked. It's very clear and obvious that the Bills logo is a charging buffalo, just as the Sabres logo features it. But to think of it in the terms that he put it in, I think it's something maybe I've taken for granted, is that the Buffalo sports community has this really cool, unique backstory, if you will, with our logos being able to so beautifully emulate and evoke the city's name without needing, like Paul said, a nickname or some other designator besides simply this big, strong, beautiful animal mascot that can be put into logo form. There's one extremely unique aspect to the Sabres uniforms, and specifically their original uniforms, that was not only unique to the Buffalo Sabres and the NHL, but quite frankly, sports as a whole. And that unique aspect has been picked up once again by the Sabres' most recent uniform redesign, which was led by Eric Bodamer, and this was a highlight of our conversation together. And the unique aspect is the striping pattern. The striping pattern on Buffalo's original home uniforms, and now their current road uniforms, features a blue sleeve stripe with a gold hem stripe. And that mismatched striping pattern, again, is unique to Buffalo. And it's something that's a really cool and original aspect to Buffalo's uniforms that no other team can lay claim to.
One of the great questions, and I'm not even sure if Seymour knows the answer to this, or if why the stripes on the hem and the stripe and the
Oh my
sleeves on
gosh.
the white are opposite.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a question I've always wanted to know. And that's one of those things where is it one of those things where it was just a mistake?
The rumor I've heard, and it is totally unsubstantiated, I don't even know the first place I've heard it, was that because if the picture, I think you were tagged in the thread of like
Yeah.
the prototypes were like Leaf jerseys, right? The ones that were in the
Yes.
Buffalo Evening News.
Yeah. Punch
And
just
so,
wanted to screw it to the Leafs. He just
yeah.
wanted, yeah.
And so those obviously weren't going to be the jerseys, but I guess the rumor I heard, and again, I wish I could remember where I read this, but it was like they got their jerseys so late that they didn't have time to fix the mistake of the stripes on the hem and the sleeves. And then they just kept it for whatever reason. It's a wonderfully romantic idea, I think.
It absolutely is. And it's the type of thing where it feels like the most obvious answer has to be has to be the correct answer.
Yeah.
Because there is no reason on earth to not have those match, right?
Hmm.
Like, why would you do that? Like, people weren't making design decisions in 1970, right? You were buying stuff stock out of a catalog. You weren't saying, "Hey, you know what would be cool is if we they weren't making design decisions. There wasn't an art director, there wasn't somebody in the background, you know, coming up with thematic ideas and storytelling. It had to be a mistake. Somehow somebody flip-flopped the colors on a order form or a drawing or something, and the rest is history. And you know what? It works.
Yeah.
It just works. I don't and that's one of the things that in working on the stuff for in 20 was adamant that and the organization completely agreed, was like, this is yours. You own this. No one else has this. And you own it, and it's the most gorgeous white jersey in the league. And yeah, you're going to sell a million of them.
I really loved that Eric had brought this up during the course of our conversation together because that rumor about the mismatched stripes being a production error is floated around here and there. And again, it's totally unsubstantiated. I'm not even sure where I first saw it, like you heard me say in my conversation with Eric. But the point being is that it's this really cool aspect of the Sabres uniforms that you might even overlook if you're not looking closely enough. But when you look closely and you learn more about this team and it becomes part of your sporting identity, you can't miss it. And I just think it's a really, really cool aspect of Buffalo's overarching hockey history, but also specifically as part of Buffalo's uniform history. Now, rolling the clock back to the 1970s into the 1970-71 season, Buffalo's first official NHL appearance in the regular season came in their road blue uniforms. The final product was a royal blue jersey with 3 gold stripes on the sleeves and waists, gold numbers with white trim, and a twine closure on the collar. The team's initial uniforms did not feature names on the back, nor a shoulder patch, 2 items which would be added in the future. Blue pants with a single gold stripe with white trim were worn with blue socks, with 3 sets of triple stripes, which rose from the lower shin to just above the knee. The Sabres' home uniforms were much more colorful, something that remains true to this day with the team's white jerseys. The original home uniform featured a twine neck closure, just like the road uniforms, but with blue numbers trimmed in gold, and those mismatched blue and gold stripes on the sleeves. The home uniforms used the same blue pants worn with the road uniforms above white socks with a striping pattern that matched the sleeves of the uniform with a blue, gold, blue striping pattern. And like the road jerseys, the socks repeated the stripes 3 times up the leg. The striping on the socks created something of a bumblebee effect that was also unique for its time, as no other team in the league featured socks with more than 3 stripes in total, let alone 3 sets of 3 stripes like the Sabres wore. This remains something that was unique to the Sabres for the entire duration that these uniforms were worn. The blue and gold look was a stark difference from the red, white, and blue worn by the Bills and both the baseball and hockey playing Bisons. The AHL Bison's uniforms were beautiful in their own right. The Pepsi bottle cap uniform and logo has a cult status in the region, so much so that the team used that Buffalo script from the bottle cap logo as inspiration for the crest on their 40th anniversary jerseys. The bold red uniforms with red and blue trim featured stripes that sat high on the shoulders. Prior versions featured a striping pattern similar to that of the Sabres' 40th anniversary jerseys, with a pair of thin blue stripes trimmed in white on the sleeves and waist. I think when you look back at the Buffalo Sabres uniform history, and specifically that original look, the original uniform that they stepped on the ice with in 1970, is to think about the entire package and how unique and also cohesive their overall look was. And it calls to mind something that Paul Lukas mentioned about hockey uniform design as a whole during our conversation.
Hockey, in my mind, is the most intriguing sport for uniform design because you have the most real estate to work with. And let's contrast, for example, in basketball. That's really the trickiest sport because the jerseys don't have sleeves. The pants are just shorts. Most players don't really wear socks or high socks. Some of them wear leggings, but that's not considered part of the uniform design. That's just like a piece of equipment or an accessory. But in hockey, number one, almost the entire body is covered, right, except the face. And so that is a really big canvas for a designer to work with. And number two, there's no requirement in hockey, as there is in basketball and in football, for you to have a number on the front of the jersey. And so that means that you have a lot of space to play around with a logo or a script or whatever you want to do. And number three, hockey is the only one of the major sports where the jersey is designed to be worn untucked. And so that gives you even more real estate to play around with, to do something with. That's why you have those belly stripes, horizontal stripes around the hemline in hockey that you don't have in other sports. And hockey has, because the pants are shorts, or breezers or whatever you want to call them. And you have these long stockings that are very much part of the uniform. It's not like we see in other sports, in baseball where the socks or stirrups have essentially become obsolete because players wear their pants mostly down to their ankles, or in basketball where most players wear low socks now, or even in football where most players just wear like white tights now. In hockey, the hosiery or leggings or whatever, stockings, whatever you want to call it, is very much still part of the uniform design. And so I think first, the most obvious thing is because you don't have a number on the front. There's no requirement for that. You have that crest. And that's why in hockey, especially, it's so important to have a strong primary logo because that's going to be on the chest of the jersey. That's what people are going to see. There is the occasional team that has gotten away with lettering, like the Rangers, of course, famously have that diagonal lettering across the chest. That was mimicked once, I believe, by the Avalanche and a couple other teams. I think the Hurricanes now have the Canes jersey, but really the Rangers kind of own that, the idea of lettering on the chest versus a logo. And we've seen a couple of teams try with a script. The Wild had a Minnesota script that almost looked more like a baseball script, that you'd see on a baseball jersey for one of their alternate jerseys. But again, that was for an alternate. Most hockey teams have that crest. And so it's really important that you have a strong jersey. It's really important that you have a strong color scheme because, again, the entire body is covered by the uniform. It's not like in other sports where, you've got short sleeves or short pants or anything like that. And even the gloves, right? Like you want a good color scheme for the accessories, like the gloves and the helmet, goalie pads. That's another element that hockey has that other sports don't have. You have this one position, the goalie, that has all this extra gear that other sports, that the other players don't have, whether it's the pads, of course, the mask, even the blocker and the glove. So hockey, I think, is the most interesting sport from a uniform standpoint, just because there's just so much space, so much fabric, so much real estate that you get to play around with as a designer. And I think the key is to use that space wisely. Don't get carried away with silly ideas like putting the team name in the belly stripe or something like that. Because don't do things just because you can. Do things that make sense.
I think Paul's observation is really cool. It's not that it's a completely foreign idea that a hockey uniform needs to be completely cohesive and tie in the pants and the socks and the jerseys and everything that goes into it. That is somewhat obvious. I think if you go to Isothetics or other jersey mock ups and other concepts that fans and designers will create, you will see that. It's not something that people often overlook. But to think of it from the perspective of how unique it is to other sports is a really cool insight and a really cool viewpoint to have. And that's especially notable here in Buffalo, where the team's original uniforms, and now in many ways their current uniforms, have earned such iconic status both at home and with hockey fans around the world. And I think that's really special in a lot of ways. I think back to when the Sabres were wearing the slug, and even at times during the goat head era, you would see news stories or clickbait type articles of people talking about the best hockey jerseys ever or the best hockey jerseys of X period of time. And almost always the Sabres white jersey would be on those lists, if not at the top of those lists. And I just think it speaks volumes to the brand and the look that was created by the Sabres the first time they took the ice in 1970. And it's something that has stuck with the team to this day, despite all the uniform changes the Sabres have made. They have this indelible, beautiful brand connected to that original logo and the original blue and gold color scheme. And now to know that the Knoxes were so devoted to establishing a unique brand for their hockey team is even more rewarding when you connect that to how strong and visceral the connections are and continue to be to the Buffalo Sabres logo and colors. Just like the name, the Sabres uniforms represented a significant break from not only the hockey teams that previously called Buffalo home, but the city's professional sports franchises as a whole, just as the Knoxes desired when they set out to pick a name for their new hockey club. Now all that was left was to take the ice. I want to say thank you once again to Paul Lukas and Eric Bodamer for their contributions to this episode. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with both of them, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of their thoughts on a future episode that will explore all of the uniform and logo changes the Sabres have made throughout their history. Further information and the links to the reference material used in this episode can be found in the show notes. References include the American Indian College Fund, the U.S. Polo Association, Buffalo News, and the book Fabric of the Game. Next time on Warpath, the Sabres take the ice for their inaugural season.